Hello everybody, my name is Eric and welcome to my channel. Now, a lot of you may have found this channel because I mentioned it on my gaming channel, or maybe we connected on social media in some way. So if you haven't heard of my gaming channel, I will put the link in the description. But in any case, thanks for stopping by. If you enjoy yourself, make sure that you leave a like, and I definitely hope you'll consider subscribing. As I thought about getting started on this channel, I wasn't sure if I wanted to jump straight into vlogging or if I wanted to do some sort of video intro to my channel. So really, I guess I'm just going to do both right here. When I really got started on YouTube in terms of creating content and live streaming, it was on my gaming channel. Initially, it was my hope that all my interests could be contained in that one channel. I knew I wanted my Christianity to be explicit, but I also wanted to genuinely enjoy the gaming and entertainment content that I was including without somehow forcing a connection with my faith in some insincere way. As a result, I ended up making a few mini documentaries and commentary videos, some related to gaming or games I was playing, some with no connection at all. People were generally responsive and they didn't complain when I branched out, but at this point I want to be able to talk more exclusively about my faith and about theological ideas and the Christian life, but I don't want to have any forced connection with gaming or entertainment, whether that force comes from my viewers or just from my own mind. So to start, I guess you could call this a vlogging channel. I want to be able to share thoughts about the Christian life with you. Nothing too complicated, just me and all of you talking like this. Some of these videos may be simple, just thoughts and observations. Others may become more theological. I do in fact have a master's degree in theology, if you didn't know that. So I hope to integrate what I've learned and studied over the years. If I can keep up my motivation and desire to create content on this channel, then perhaps I'll branch out into having maybe interviews and conversations with friends or people I connect with, and maybe I'll be hit with ideas for some more mini or not so mini documentaries, who knows, if I feel really ambitious. And of course, your feedback and involvement in the comment section below will only help my motivation, so please feel free to participate right down there in the comment section. And again, welcome to everyone. So, as I've been letting my mind wander over the past day or so, I've begun to think about conversations I've had with people in recent years. The kinds of conversations that constantly come back into my head for a visit because they felt so unresolved. That's not to say I haven't come to some conclusion about what I think regarding these conversations, but the fact that I didn't know what to say at the time forced me to replay and reimagine these conversations numerous times until I gained some understanding about where the disconnect was. I'm sure many of you have this habit as well. I want to focus on a certain type of exchange that I imagine many Christians have probably experienced, particularly young Christians who are coming to terms with their faith. I remember when I was still a teenager and was attending a week-long Christian summer camp. I was you might say, green, idealistic homeschooler who respected the camp counselor and took a measure of interest in the Bible study and decidedly Christian aspects of the camp experience. Even if parts of me were not captivated by all of it, there was some sincere part of me that thought I should. On the other hand, also in my cabin, there were 2 or 3 campers who were only there because their parents probably insisted that they go. They had a clear contempt for the fact that Christian activities were being forced on them. They saw the chapel services as unnecessary and insincere. They saw the rules surrounding male and female interaction to be prudish and stupid. This, of course, led to some less than perfectly friendly interactions between me and them. They found me to be an odd specimen, taking these different Christian activities seriously. Not cracking crass jokes, not having a smirk in chapel, or not trying to hit on various girls. Well, to be honest, I was homeschooled. I likely just didn't know how to. I remember they eventually started to ask me a bunch of questions in the cabin about my experiences in life so far. my lack of experiences with girls, my lack of experience with common teenage sins, as you might say. I remember basically shrugging my shoulders and saying something like, I'm a Christian and I was taught not to do that stuff. Now, my point in talking about this isn't to paint myself as some sort of saint from birth. I've long since matured in my understanding of sin and its work in every heart, whether it be a green homeschooler like me or rebellious kids forced to go to camp when they don't want to. I'm sure my innocence, quote unquote, had mixed motives at the time, both sincerity, by God's grace, but also self-righteousness and pride. None of this is my main point. What makes these conversations return to my mind from time to time was they said something like, how can you say X, Y, or Z are bad if you've never experienced them? How can you speak to this or that behavior if you've never engaged in it yourself? How can you rebuke a sin with real authority unless you've walked in it yourself? Now, perhaps you've experienced different variations of this sort of argument as you've had conflicts with those outside the Christian faith and maybe people who would say they're inside the Christian faith. It wasn't until recently that I realized this is a very, I think, early iteration, you might say, of a common form of argument that is made concerning other topics. But it's done with a lot of social weight, actually. I don't want to get too political here, but as you will likely inevitably discover, I'm pretty traditional in my Christian views, and I hold a lot of stereotypical political views that a conservative Christian would. I get a certain guilty pleasure from those corners of YouTube with clickbait titles like Feminist Gets Owned, or Ben Shapiro Destroys So-and-so, or Jordan Peterson Schools so-and-so. You get the idea. All that to say, the specific example I wanted to bring up was secular feminism. I find secular feminism and its pretensions in opposing quote-unquote traditional Christian patriarchal values to be really misguided, to put it mildly. Beyond that, I see the modern banner that secular feminism waves, namely abortion, to be an absolutely murderous blight on our culture that must end. All this to say, another past conversation that loves to invade my mind from time to time, whether I want it to or not, is one I had with a feminist. After having a casual conversation for a while, she inevitably decided to make a snide remark about foolish pro-lifers and their stupid opinion that life begins at conception. Now, mind you, she actually claimed to be a Christian and belonged to a very left-wing Christian denomination, quote-unquote Christian. But nothing about her worldview that I could see really resembled anything Christian. Now, I chose not to let her comment go, and I decided to, at least in this case, stand my ground as someone who's pro-life. It wasn't long before the conversation basically terminated on her making a comment to the effect of, "You're only saying that because you're a man. You don't understand the experience of women." Now, there certainly was a lot more conversation that followed that, but I want to draw attention to the nature of this particular statement from her. It's become common in various cultural and political debates to appeal to this form of truth. I've since discovered that the academic term for this is standpoint epistemology. In short, what that means is, let's say that the person you are confronting or debating is the member of a group that is culturally considered to be marginalized or oppressed in some way. You try to begin with an objective truth claim, as you see it, about right and wrong or good and evil, but you don't take into account, at least as they see it, the authentic experience of the individual you're talking to. Well, in that case, your moral claim bears no weight to them. Your attempts at objectivity and attempts to be rooted in evidence really cease to matter. Not only that, but these tools of reasoning are considered likely to just be a mask that you're wearing to cover up your attempts at maintaining the power of your dominant group that you're either a part of or that you're defending. If you're a man, it's your patriarchal maleness that makes you oppressive, and you're trying to maintain that power whether you recognize it or not. If you're a Christian, whether male or female, then it's your oppressive Western traditional values that you want to maintain, and again, you're just trying to maintain your power through that. Those you would seek to confront or argue with claim to know your heart and your intentions in this matter better than you know them yourself, though you could never be in a position to know theirs, I could list numerous examples like this, not only examples from my life, but examples that are now prevalent in our culture and have been widely talked about in our political climate. Now, there's plenty of conservative Christian commentators who have done a great job talking about the problems with, what I mentioned, standpoint epistemology, or its connection with critical theory, or critical theory's origins in Marxism. But I'd rather keep my main point focused as I can. Basically, am I saying that those who defend their bad political opinions or bad life philosophies by saying you don't have the proper life experience to judge are just grown-up versions of my rebellious teenage cabin mates? Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. But am I saying that every person who disagrees with me on a minute political issue is defending sin? Or that every opinion that diverges from mine diverges from the will of God? Well, no, I'm fallible, of course. But I am saying that any defense of a perspective or a behavior or a political stance that dismisses opposition on the basis of the opponent's lack of authentic experience in this modern sense is a bad defense. Even if the position being defended happens to be right, it's being defended in a bad way. Now, this began to click in my head over the last couple days when I began to ponder the standard of argument that was put in front of me by this feminist that I mentioned from this previous conversation that I had. According to her, I said what I said to her because I was a man. Not because I was compelled by information, not because of some objective moral conviction. No, it was ultimately my identity and the supposed hidden power protecting motives that go with it. Therefore, it stands to reason, if I wasn't a man, my perspective would be different. And if I stayed a man, as I obviously had to, but had the guts to let go of my presuppositions and hidden motives, then my opinion would obviously change to align more with hers. So according to her standard of reasoning, is there any actual way that my perspective that I held then and now could gain merit in her eyes? How could it? I'm helplessly bound to my masculinity, and even if I was willing to broaden my perspective, I'm hopelessly bound to my selfish motives, which are hidden not only from everyone else, but also from me. I'm hopelessly in the wrong from the outset, and any attempt to disprove this fact proves the truth of it in her eyes. So here's a tip. When a game is this rigged against you from the start, you're under no obligation to play it. Christian truth offers something far better, but we need to understand the nature of it. Scripture says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, how exactly does that apply here? In fallen, I would say worldly reasoning, we start with the individual and try to reason our way to what we understand to be the truth. Now, I mentioned I'm an admirer of Jordan Peterson's work, and I stand by that. And for those of you who are unaware, Jordan Peterson is a professor of psychology from Toronto who has stood up to the most radical elements of political leftism, as you might call it, and that gained him a strong YouTube following in the process. His work includes a surprisingly reverent psychological exploration of the Christian scriptures. Now, while his insights are sometimes helpful and sometimes out to lunch, they're never disrespectful. However, as much as he has landed in a place where he aligns with Christian values in many areas, his view of truth is not foundationally Christian. While he won't flat out deny a doctrine like the true historic resurrection of Christ, he sees any ability to authoritatively comment on it as the nearly impossible endpoint of massive amounts of academic research and devastatingly rigorous thinking. First comes human reasoning, then comes truth. I'm sure he would push back in some insightful ways. I respect him enough to say that. But I do think in the end I would maintain my basic analysis of his thinking is accurate. The problem with this order in the pursuit of truth is that there is indeed biblical backing to the statement that all human beings are self-interested. Sure, it's wrong to throw this statement around as a cheap argument tactic to evade the reasoning of a person you might be disagreeing with, but that doesn't mean it's not true. When human beings defend things like bad political perspectives or foolish lifestyle choices, whether they're benign or deeply sinful, they generally have, selfish motives at the center. We then set up a form of reasoning that will defend the stance we've taken after the fact. Any kind of argument will do. Presto, standpoint epistemology. Christianity doesn't start with the individual human being. It starts with God and the fact that God has spoken. Not only that, but he's spoken so clearly that every human being has an underlying, undeniable certainty that God exists. Just give Romans 1 a gander if you want to see what I'm talking about. There are those who stand in submission to this reality, also known as fearing the Lord, and there are those who have yet to do that. According to the proverb we've quoted, this position is not arrived at by endless academic pursuit and rigorous reasoning. It is the beginning of reasoning in God's world. So let's go back to the specific life examples I gave. Is there a benefit to listening and growing in my understanding of the experience of another person? Of course. When I talk about tragic issues like abortion and I hear difficult stories of women trapped with unwanted pregnancies, am I advocating for coldness in the name of objectivity? Of course not. My point is that as fallen human beings, self-interest impacts all of us, and the fear of anything but God will never be the beginning of wisdom. If we are our own foundation of truth and we are governed by so-called experience, shoving that personal experience in the face of those who challenge us, then our path will always be skewed by self-interest. If revelation is our starting point, then we have an actual filter to apply to our experience, allowing ourselves to be subject to something. This won't make us arrogant if we are truly driven by a desire to submit to God. That doesn't mean there won't be those who accuse us of arrogance for claiming to have the truth. It actually makes it more likely that we'll receive this accusation at one point or another. As I've heard it put before, for those who love God, hatred of God is arrogance. For those who hate God, love of God is arrogance. And why shouldn't this be the case? If I am the starting point of truth, that's another way of saying I'm God, and this town ain't big enough for two gods. Should Christians remain aware of the remnants of fallenness that remain in their lives as they embrace and seek to share the truth? Of course. This obviously isn't a defense of the idea that Christians can't develop arrogance and condescension in their tone, even as they say true things. But there is a sense in which, no matter how much a worldly mindset says it's humbly seeking truth and being open-minded, if it didn't start with a fear of the Lord, it is not wise and it's rooted in pride by nature. So don't be intimidated by those who would try to silence you by pointing out the obvious fact that you are not them and your experience is not their experience. Listen, learn, love, empathize, but ultimately there is someone who stands over and above both of you and both of your experiences, and he has spoken. So thank you so much for watching and listening, everyone. Again, if you enjoyed yourself, make sure that you leave a like and comment below to continue the conversation. If you want to join me on my new journey with this channel, make sure that you subscribe. If you like gaming and didn't discover me through my gaming channel, well, I do have one, and the link, again, as I mentioned before, is in the description. So see you all next time.